I found out my husband was cheating on the same night I found out I was pregnant, but that's not even the twist. The real shock came 3 weeks later when I discovered the woman he was sleeping with had been sitting at our dinner table every single Sunday for the past 2 years. By the time I was done with him, he didn't just lose his marriage, he lost everything he had ever built. My name is Kaya, and this is not a story I ever wanted to tell. But I'm telling it anyway because somewhere out there, someone is living through what I lived through, and they need to know it's possible to come out the other side stronger than you ever thought you could be. Before we start, if stories about strength, betrayal, and quiet, powerful justice speak to you, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Trust me, you're going to want to see how this one ends. Now let's go back to where it all began. 3 years ago, I thought I had the kind of life people write books about. I was 31 years old, married for 6 years to a man who on paper was everything a woman was told to want. He ran a growing construction business. We lived in a beautiful house on the edge of town, the kind with a wraparound porch and a garden I spent my weekends taking care of. We had 2 dogs, a mortgage we could actually afford, and every Sunday his family came over for dinner. His mother adored me, his younger brother treated me like his own sister, and his best friend from childhood, a woman I'll call Dana, had become one of my closest friends too. She was warm, funny, always the first to help when I needed anything. She used to joke that she'd steal my husband's cooking recipes because he made better pasta than any restaurant in town. I remember thinking, sitting at that table on Sundays, surrounded by people I loved, that I had built something rare, something safe. But safety, I would learn, is often just the last thing you notice before it disappears. It started small. He began working later, not dramatically later, just enough that I didn't think twice. A phone that used to sit face up on the counter started staying in his pocket. He'd laugh at something on his screen, and when I asked what was funny, he'd say, "Oh, just a work thing," and change the subject a little too quickly. I told myself I was imagining it. We'd been together for years. People get busy. Businesses grow. I wanted to believe the story I had built in my head, the one where we were still the couple who slow danced in the kitchen while dinner burned on the stove. The first real crack came on a Tuesday evening in March. I was folding laundry when his phone buzzed on the nightstand, and out of habit, not suspicion, I glanced at the screen. A message preview flashed for 2 seconds before disappearing. "Can't wait for Sunday, miss you already." My stomach dropped, but my mind immediately tried to build a bridge to safety. Sunday was family dinner. Maybe it was his mother. Maybe it was his brother talking about the game they always watched together. I wanted so badly to believe that. Over the next few weeks, I became someone I didn't recognize. I started noticing everything. The way he'd angle his phone away from me at dinner. The way he showered the second he got home from certain job sites more often than made sense. The way he'd get a text and smile at it in a way he used to smile at me. I didn't confront him, not yet. Something in me, some quiet, steady voice told me to watch first, to gather the truth before I said a single word, so I did. I started paying closer attention to the calendar on the fridge, to the receipts in his jacket pockets, to the little inconsistencies in his stories that never used to be there, and slowly, painfully, a pattern began to form, a pattern that circled again and again back to Sunday. Back to our family dinners. The night everything changed started like any other Thursday. I had gone to the doctor that afternoon, and I had news I couldn't wait to share. I was pregnant. After 2 years of trying, after quiet disappointment month after month, it had finally happened. I remember driving home with my hands shaking on the steering wheel, practicing how I'd tell him. I pictured his face lighting up. I pictured us finally getting the family we'd both wanted. I got home early. His truck wasn't in the driveway, so I decided to surprise him at his office instead, the little test in my purse, a bottle of sparkling cider in the passenger seat. The office was dark when I pulled up, except for a light in the back room. I let myself in with my key, quiet, smiling, imagining his face. And that's when I heard her voice. Not a stranger's voice, not someone I'd never met. A voice I knew as well as my own sister's. I stood frozen in that hallway as I listened to 2 people I trusted more than almost anyone in the world talk to each other in a way that made my entire life crack open like glass. She wasn't just someone he'd met. She had a name I said every single Sunday, a name I hugged at the door every week, a name who had once cried on my shoulder about her own failed relationships while I told her she deserved better. She deserved better, that line replayed in my head like a cruel joke. I didn't scream, I didn't storm in. Something inside me, some cold, clear part of my mind I didn't know existed, told me to be silent, to turn around, to walk back out the way I came in. I sat in my car for almost an hour that night, the pregnancy test still in my purse, and I made a decision that would change everything. I wasn't going to react, I was going to plan. The next morning, I woke up and did something I never thought I'd be capable of. I smiled at him over breakfast. I asked about his day. I kissed him goodbye like nothing in the world had changed. Inside, I was a different person entirely. I called my sister that same afternoon, the only person I told everything to. She listened in stunned silence as I explained what I had heard, who was involved, and what I intended to do about it. When I finished, she said something I will never forget. She said, "Kaya, don't just leave. Leave in a way he'll remember for the rest of his life." That sentence became my compass. I reached out to a lawyer quietly, using a friend's name to book the consultation so nothing would trace back to me if he checked our accounts. I learned things I hadn't known before, that in our state, financial misconduct and hidden assets could dramatically shift a settlement in my favor if I could prove them. I learned that infidelity itself might not matter much in court, but deception, hidden money, and betrayal of trust absolutely could, if documented properly. So I started documenting. I began quietly saving screenshots whenever his phone was left unlocked. I started keeping copies of bank statements he thought I never looked at. I noticed, buried in an account I wasn't supposed to know about, transfers to a name I now recognized instantly, gifts, hotel charges, a small apartment lease he'd been paying for under a business expense category. He had been building a second life, and he had been doing it, in part, with money from a business I had helped him start with my own savings 6 years earlier. That detail changed everything for me. This wasn't just betrayal of the heart, it was theft of everything I had helped build. For the next 2 months, I lived a double life of my own, one where I was the loving wife at home, and another where I was quietly, methodically taking my life back. I met with my lawyer 3 more times, always during my lunch break, always paying in cash. I moved a portion of my personal savings, money from before our marriage that was legally mine alone, into an account he didn't know existed. I gathered every document, every message, every financial record I could find, building a case so solid it wouldn't just protect me, it would expose exactly what he had done. The hardest part wasn't the paperwork, it was Sunday dinners. I sat across from her week after week and smiled. I passed her the bread, I asked about her week, and she smiled back, completely unaware that I knew every secret she thought was safely hidden. There were nights I went home and cried in the shower so no one would hear me, but I never let it show at that table. There was one close call about 6 weeks into my plan when he came home early and found me on my laptop with a folder of documents open. My heart stopped. But years of loving him, ironically, had taught me exactly how to read his face, and I knew instantly he hadn't seen anything important. I closed the laptop calmly and said I was just paying bills. He believed me. He had no reason not to. By the time my son's due date was approaching, 4 months into my pregnancy, everything was in place. The financial documentation, the legal separation agreement drafted and ready, a new apartment secretly leased in my name only, paid for with money he never knew I had, and most importantly, undeniable proof of exactly where his business money had been going and exactly who had been receiving it. I chose a Sunday for the reveal. It felt right. It felt like closing a circle. Everyone arrived as usual, laughing, carrying dishes to the table, completely unaware that this would be the last Sunday dinner our family would ever share in that house. I waited until dessert. Then I stood up and I placed a folder in the center of the table. I didn't yell, I didn't cry. I spoke calmly, clearly, the way you'd read a verdict. I told them what I knew. I told them how long I had known. I watched his face drain of color as I described the apartment, the hotel charges, the business funds. I watched her hands begin to shake as I explained, gently but firmly, that I had every screenshot, every message, every piece of evidence needed to prove exactly what had happened between them for the past 2 years. His mother's fork dropped onto her plate. His brother stared at him like he was looking at a stranger. And then I told them the second part, the part he truly wasn't prepared for. I explained that the business he ran, the one built partly on my initial investment years ago, was legally tied to me in ways he had forgotten because I had never removed my name during a refinancing process he assumed I'd signed away. I had spent the last 2 months quietly, legally, and completely within my rights, securing my share of everything we had built together. The house, a portion of the business, my personal savings, safely moved and protected. He wasn't losing a wife that night. He was losing half of everything he thought was entirely his. I watched him try to speak, try to explain, try to turn to his own family for support. But the family that had once wrapped around him like a warm blanket now looked at him with the exact same shock and heartbreak I had carried alone for months. I picked up my folder, thanked them for dinner, and walked out the door with my head high in my hand, resting gently on the small curve of my stomach. The months that followed weren't easy, but they were mine. He lost far more than he ever imagined that night. The business struggled without the stability my initial investment and quiet financial management had provided for years. His family, once so close, pulled away from him slowly but surely, unable to look past what he had done to someone they had genuinely loved. Dana lost her closest friendships too, the ones built on years of Sunday dinners that were never really what they seemed. The two of them, I later heard, didn't even last another year together. Trust, it turns out, is hard to build with someone who taught you exactly how easily they could destroy it. I moved into my new apartment with boxes I had quietly packed weeks in advance. I gave birth to my son that winter, surrounded not by the family I thought I'd have, but by the family I chose, my sister, a handful of true friends, people who showed up for me without hesitation. I won't pretend it didn't hurt. Some nights, even now, I think about the life I thought I was building, but I've learned something that I carry with me every single day. Real strength isn't about screaming the loudest or breaking things in anger. Real strength is staying calm, staying smart, and quietly building your escape while everyone around you thinks you're still asleep. He didn't just lose a wife that night at the dinner table. He lost his family's trust, his business stability, and the version of himself he thought no one could ever see clearly. I, on the other hand, found a version of myself I didn't know existed, someone calm under pressure, someone patient enough to wait and strong enough to walk away with everything I deserved. If you made it this far, thank you for sitting with my story. I know it wasn't an easy one to hear, but I hope it reminded you of something important. You are allowed to protect yourself. You are allowed to be patient, strategic, and quietly powerful, even when everything around you feels like it's falling apart. If this story moved you, hit that like button and let me know in the comments what part hit you the hardest. Subscribe if you want to hear more real stories about strength, betrayal, and the quiet kind of justice that changes everything. And if you've ever lived through something like this, share your story below. Someone reading it might need to hear it today. I'm Kaya, and this is how I took my life back.